Welcome to the Lexington Remembers series, sponsored by the Lexington Council on Aging and Friends of the Council on Aging. Today we are very pleased to be interviewing Jackie Ward. She is a town meeting member. She was a town meeting member. She has served on the Appropriations Committee. She was in charge of the Vote Today campaign in Lexington, which we'll talk about later on. And, of course, we all know Jackie as the White Tricorne Hat recipient. And we welcome you to today's Leading Lexingtonians. All right, in the early 1950s, you became very interested in the total education of students here in Lexington.
Yes.
And what pushed you to do this and want to do this? I mean, considering the total population of students.
Well, a friend of mine had trouble. Her son had been in Lexington schools and was very intelligent. Well, he felt that he wasn't challenged enough. And he quit school because there wasn't enough challenge for him. So I realized that there was a lack of programs for all children, and especially those that were very talented, and those that had handicaps. Just wasn't anything. In Massachusetts, the only programs that they really had for people that deviated from the methods that were being taught in school were put into Chapter 70, which was handicapped and learning disabled kids. They didn't have any programs for them. And I figured education is the redeeming thing for everybody. Everybody deserves an education.
Education for all, right?
For all.
And you were influenced by the works and the writings and the of Edith Evans, am I correct?
Well, she was trying to convince Lexington that they should go to phonetic teaching.
And what is, just for our audience, what is phonetic teaching?
Well, it's teaching reading in a different vogue than Lexington was. And so she wanted company to go around and convince Lexington that this was something they should do. So I went along just as to give her support. And that's when I discovered that there was a lack for all students.
When you're talking about this too, about everyone having an education, you're talking about establishing a program for special needs, but also a program for the advanced students as well, right? We did not have an AP program early on.
Well, we were one of the first to have an AP, but the AP program was really enforced long before special needs came in.
Right.
But this actually 766 is it really says that everybody is special, and everybody should have a core evaluation and have a program that brings them up. And it also says that if a child is 3 years behind, then he really has to have a core evaluation, which means a special program just for him.
Yes.
And the bottom line is that this was established, but the state has never really funded it up to what it's supposed to do. So that special needs has been on the books for a long time, but they hadn't been funded. And they haven't, even today, they're not funded it the way they should be funded.
So the funding comes mostly from the local,
Well, it comes from the state, and then there's also federal funds for it.
Okay.
But it also is based, the basis of Massachusetts funding of education is based on real estate.
Yes.
So that it makes it inadequate for a lot of poor towns.
Right.
So that's still the trouble now.
Right, the funding for this.
Yeah.
When you're talking about all of these things, we're talking basically about the elementary schools, right, and the high schools, in the high school here in Lexington.
Yeah.
And then what did, you mentioned to me Vernon Page. How did he work into this?
Vernon Page, who was a plumber and also,
Mm-hmm.
and Eric Malo Christensen were pushing for this vocational school. And it was 16 towns, and it was to be built in Lexington and Lincoln. And they pushed for it because there wasn't anything in, and if you wanted an vocational education in Lexington, you had to go to Newton or some other school. And at the same time, Vernon realized, and Eric, that there are a lot of students that are hands-on learners, and vocational education was their redeeming grace.
Mm-hmm.
So they pushed for it, and they had the advisory for all of this, were the superintendents of all of the 16 towns. But the students in Lexington, not only was it changing their way of life, they're changing their friends and everything, but they had to make the choice at 8th grade. And it was, the high school was set up at 9th grade, so that it made it a double frustrating thing for a child from Lexington to make that choice.
Right, that's an early age.
Yeah, an early age to
right.
do it, and plus the fact they had to give up music. Vocational didn't have very much music. They didn't have very many sports. They didn't have foreign language, so that it was really a very upsetting choice for anybody that wanted to go to
Right.
VOCAD.
I do recall when I was teaching, when they first opened, I wouldn't say the first year or so, but after the vocational school was open, I believe that some Lexington students went to Minuteman part-time.
Yeah.
They took some courses like in the morning
Hmm.
at the high school,
Yeah.
and then they went to Minuteman.
Yeah.
But now I think we have more students enrolled in Minuteman full-time.
Yeah. Well, I think for the most part, the parents in Lexington didn't want their children to go to VOCAD. And I think an awful lot of students that would have benefited by it were influenced by their parents.
Yes.
And I think Minuteman didn't have a very good reputation when it started out.
Mhm.
And I think that when we got Ron Fitzgerald in there, it really changed the whole attitude of the town towards Minuteman.
I think one thing that has changed the attitude of some people in Lexington toward Minuteman, the Garden Club every year has a program at Minuteman, and then they have their luncheon at Minuteman, and they give the students, give 2 scholarships
Yeah.
to students. And I think the people that attend this are very impressed with what goes on at Minuteman. Sometimes we don't realize that. And they do have an academic program along with their vocational program.
They do. They have an awful lot of students that go on to higher education.
Oh, yes.
And they have a student that got a scholarship to MIT from Minuteman.
Mm-hmm.
And so their reputation has improved.
Very much.
Yeah. And they've included a lot of technology in Minuteman.
Yes.
Minuteman got an award as one of the 10 best it's high schools that work. So that 10, they're 10th in the country. So they really have improved their reputation a lot. But,
Very, very worthwhile, I think.
yeah.
What else have you done to help the education in Lexington?
Well, I think being on the 766 really started, if it was really enforced the way it would, no child left behind should not have to be written.
Right.
So, and I think the thing that happened in Lexington is that we had such a good reputation for 766 that an awful lot of people moved here for our special ed program. And we also had very good special ed administrators, so that they really did get what they were, the individual
Deserve.
educational plans. So, but, no, I think Lexington has always had a push for good schools. I mean, way back, there was a committee that I was on that was the Citizens for Lexington Schools, and it was a push to make the price, the teachers' salaries competitive with all of and I mean, just the citizens have been aware of how much education is valued and how important it is that they continue to be top. But
It's through your efforts, though, that a lot has happened for special ed and students who need additional help, so to speak. And I think the town appreciates what you have done there. If I may, just to ask you about another project that you took on and made happen. What about the sound barrier between 128 and your street and so forth? You worked very hard to have that happen, and as I drive by now, I see that barrier that's going up, and all I can think of is, this is Jackie Ward's doing.
yeah, well, it isn't done yet, and my mind's going to be the last one to be put in, and now that it's there, I'm not so sure.
Oh, don't say that. After
Oh, it's going to be there, but it's been a pretty upsetting thing. It's because they took my side yard in '62, and so I've been fighting for it ever since then. And when I asked if it was going to be in my lifetime, Ed up the street said, "Think healthy." So that's what I'm still thinking, healthy. So, but one concern that I have is teaching people to be aware of voting and getting out to vote. I think
Yes.
that's, and I think, the League of Women Voters used to teach, have a course on town meeting and making children aware of what's going on in the town. And I don't think they do that anymore.
No, at one time, I remember that the students, juniors in the high school, had a mock town meeting. They would be prepared at school
Yeah.
About certain articles that were coming up in the
Yeah.
real town meeting.
Yeah.
And they would have the moderator, they would go down to town hall, and they would participate in a discussion
Yeah.
of certain articles each year.
Yeah.
And they would do the research and so forth.
Yeah.
And then it was interesting to see how later on the real town meeting members voted on those articles.
Yeah.
And usually they went the same way as the students had
Yeah.
gone earlier. So, but that does not exist today.
No. I think it's teaching people to be aware of the history of the whole country, really.
Mhm.
And I think getting people out to vote is one thing, but having an intelligent voter is what I am concerned about. And that's what this Vote Today sign, that when I thought it would make people aware of that the vote was coming up and they should get out and vote. And it's upset me terribly that so lack of participation in just local elections.
Mhm.
I think that's where you really have the most power and can make a bit, a very, well, have more influence. And I think that I'm concerned now that at the high school, they're not teaching children to be aware of what's going on in their town. I mean, even in the country, it upsets me to think that so few people are what are ruling the rest of us and making all the decisions by which we live.
Right.
So that
What would you suggest? How how could we get voters, eligible voters, to turn out
Well,
and to vote and participate in government?
well, I think that in order to get the vote, I would like to see them give every voter who is coming in the same tests they give immigrants when they come to become citizens.
You mean when a person becomes 21 years old, you would have them?
Pass the same test
I
that
see.
we have when we give people citizenship. And I think none of us would pass it.
Interesting.
So, no, I propose this to the Senate, to our senators and our representatives, but I don't think it'll ever come to vote. But I think that
It's interesting.
every single state, every single town has different voting regulations. And if you don't know them, you don't know the rules by which you're living. So I really would like to see that as a federal law, that everybody who gets the vote. I mean, I'm not sure what you have to pass now, whether you have to be literate or be
Right.
so I don't know what the regulations are to get your voter. So
This would be worth investigating, I think. That'll be your next project, to
Yeah.
investigate that.
So, but no, I think that education is the bottom line for all of this. And if we aren't educating every single person to really function as a literal or a knowledgeable person in this country, then we don't stand a chance.
Very thoughtful, very thoughtful.
So,
Well, we know now, I think the audience knows now, one of the reasons why you received the White Tricorne Hat, an honor given to leading Lexingtonians. And I want to thank you, Jackie. Do you have anything else that you would like to add? I know you,
no, I
No.
think it's been a wonderful town to live in. And I think there's golden opportunities for everybody to really participate if they want to.
they want to, and they should participate.
Yeah.
Be a participant in government.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jackie, very much. A leading Lexingtonian.